Subject, one. One. Subject, one.
Welcome classic rock fans to an episode of Classic Gig Review, and today I'd like to talk about a gig I attended last night, and that was Kiss at the O2 in London. I personally would defy anyone not to enjoy that show, all the explosions, bombs, pyrotechnics and theatricals. It was just an incredible show, highly visual and enjoyable from the get-go. However, one thing that surprised me is that I didn't think it was very loud. It was loud enough, of course, but not... I mean, when I saw Kiss back on the Crazy Nights tour, I mean, it was so loud that I had problems with my hearing for about 2 or 3 days afterwards. But I think in the 80s, Kiss were all about sort of power and volume, I think, really. Obviously, they ditched all the sort of theatrical, sort of comic book sort of flourishes in favour of just sort of a straight hard rock metal band, really. And I think that really what they were sort of aiming for. I must admit, I was absolutely gobsmacked to see that the concert tour programmes were £25 each. I can't imagine anyone paying £25 for a tour programme. I mean, I was complaining not so long ago, and I think they were about £15, but this is just absolutely ridiculous for something that you probably look at once and never see it and put it away. But then, you know, Kiss certainly like their merchandise, don't they? Mind you, I mustn't criticise them. I mean, the Stones merchandise was somewhat overpriced as well, I'll be honest with you. Anyway, the show itself, it's I was talking to a couple from Argentina prior to the gig, and they were obviously conveying their love of prog rock and classic rock and things like that. I did tell them to subscribe to this channel. Whether they do or not is another matter. Anyway, before the supporting artiste came on, and artiste is the correct word because he was like a performance. He did these wonderful paintings and things like that. It was quite, I can't remember his name, but it was quite Garibaldi, I think it was, or something like that. But it was interesting. His picture of John Lennon was absolutely incredible. Anyway, so I moved closer to the front, waiting for the show. Then, of course, you get that wonderful build-up, that sort of hum. And then, of course, you wanted the best, you got the best. And and then, all hell broke loose, really. Detroit Rock City, explosions, pyrotechnics, lights, lasers, everything. It was just like a warfare up there, and it was incredible to see and watch. It was just so engaging. The only thing is that really annoys me about gigs these days, as soon as the most important part of any concert for me is how the band come on and that opening track and how they kind of establish what they're going to do for the night. But then that's suddenly spoilt by this sea of mobile phones held up in the air all of a sudden, so you end up having to watch it through everybody else's phone, which annoys the shit out of me, really, to be honest with you. Anyway, so Detroit Rock City. I mean, the performances were great. They performed. The music was great. It wasn't the volume wasn't so ear-splitting as to just become like a morass of sort of distortion and noise. You could actually hear everything that was being played, and I got the impression that Kiss were kind of more focusing on a kind of almost like a family vibe in many respects. I mean, there were people with their kids there, which is nothing wrong with that, but there's certainly no swearing as there was in the 80s when I saw them. There were a bit sweary in those days. I think for me, in many respects, the show has become like a pastiche or sort of parody of what they used to do in the 70s, although obviously with probably better effects in many respects. But it ceased to become that kind of raw, heartfelt sort of rock and roll show, and more kind of a travelling circus in many respects, a travelling psycho circus, if you like. And talk about some of the performances, some of the songs. I love Detroit Rock City. War Machine was great. I really enjoyed that. You really did feel the heat coming from the stage for that one. The highlights in terms of the set list for me were God of Thunder was absolutely stunning to see. And I loved Love Gun with Paul Stanley sort of sweeping across the crowd too on a stage that had been set up earlier, sort of halfway back. And that was absolutely brilliant as well. Of course, I left after Love Gun because I had to catch a train. And that's one of the reasons why I'm not going to go to gigs in London anymore. I'm tired of having to leave, constantly checking my watch to see what time my train leaves. The set list, it was a kind of what you would expect from a Kiss show. They did all the usual ones: Love Gun, Detroit Rock City. They did I Love It Loud, Lick It Up. I have said it before, and I do feel that the set list wasn't as adventurous as it should be. Now, Paul Stanley has gone on record as saying that they perform a show for somebody who has never seen a Kiss show, not for somebody who's seen umpteen Kiss shows. You know, I understand that, but I think as the final tour, I think it would have been nice to pull out a deeper cut for some of the more hardcore fans. Now, for me, you know, it didn't have to be something from The Elder. It could have been something like All American Man from side 4 of the Alive 2 album, or Larger Than Life. What a great song that is. It would have been lovely to hear Gene sing that. Something that they've not done, something to make it kind of special, I think. So it really was a pretty much staple Kiss show. Certainly one of the pleasers in terms of the set list for me was 100,000 Years. I'm glad they pulled that one out of the bag. I wish I'd seen them on the tour before. I think that when they were doing Flaming Youth, I would have liked to have heard that. In terms of individual performances, I mean, Gene Simmons was incredible. He was awesome. His voice was still the same. He performed. He did all the fire breathing stuff, which I missed the moment he actually breathed fire because some bastard held up their phone at that moment. That was great. God of Thunder was stunning, as I think I've said. That was an incredible part of the show. All his face on all the sort of screens, looking down on the audience. That was wonderful. I do think, though, Gene Simmons tends to goof about a bit more on stage than he perhaps would have done during the sort of classic 70s period. I think he took his demonic persona much more seriously back then. So now it kind of feeds into the whole thing becoming a little bit of as kind of a self-parody in some respects, but a thoroughly enjoyable one at that. But I think Stanley, if we talk about other performances, I think Paul Stanley was fantastic. The way, the energy that guy had. Yes, his voice is creaking a little bit. You can certainly hear that his voice isn't what it was, but you can't fault him for what he gave in terms of performance. He was absolutely incredible. Tommy Thayer, Eric Singer, of course, were on the money. They performed their parts perfectly, and I know Tommy Thayer's taken a lot of shit for not being Ace Frehley. But, you know, he plays the solos note for note. He's taken some flack for that, but then if he didn't play them note for note, we would probably take flack for that as well. He does a great job, and, you know, he's a great guitar player. I love the bit as well with the solo firing the rockets out of the guitar into sort of the spaceships above and then them kind of exploding. That was quite impressive to see. And the use of lasers and lights was really, really impressive. Eric Singer, of course, got his bit with the drum rise going up, as Peter Criss used to back in the 70s. But it was an all-round sort of kind of recreation of that 1970s Kiss show, which they've been doing for a few years now. I also loved the use of retro footage when they played Deuce and Cold Gin. The screens projected sort of Kiss way back in the 70s. Now I kind of like that. It kind of really gave the show what they're doing now some anchorage with that sort of classic period. I really enjoyed that. And also I think at one point during Cold Gin the band were filmed and it was sort of retrified, if that's a word, on the screens behind as well. And that was a nice touch, I think. So overall, a wonderful, entertaining show. I mean, they pulled out all the sort of songs you would expect them to do. I Love It Loud and Heaven's on Fire, which I personally could have done without, really. I suppose I, for one, am there to hear kind of that classic sort of 70s Kiss period. But they did say they were going to sort of... the palette was going to be drawn from their whole sort of career. They even did one from Sonic Boom. But as I said, regrets. I would like to have seen at least a deeper, more obscure cut, at least one in the set list for the more hardcore fans. But other than that, it was just a great show. Anyway, thank you for watching this episode of Classic Gig Review. Were you there? What did you think of it? Please leave your comments below and check out the Facebook page, of course. Click like, subscribe, share this video. I want to try and get the subs up. But other than that, please do keep listening.